Good evening. I'm, I want to welcome everyone here tonight. I'm Joe Butcher, President, Wyoming Valley Country Club, for the Golden Members Recollection Night. And I appreciate everybody being here. We've got quite a group of individuals that have been around for quite some time. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dennis Bahala, the chairman of the 125th Anniversary Committee.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to the board for your support of our efforts this year for our 125th anniversary. And one of the major things about this year was to not only relive the history of the club, but leave a significant footprint for those members that will come after us. And the purpose of this evening was to do a video show to put in the time capsule, so 50 years from now, people won't be looking at my ugly round face, but to see everyone in this room and the significant part they have to the history of the Wyoming Valley Country Club. I mean, we have members that have been here 50 years across the table, and they all have stories to tell and recollections of the years here at the country club, both good, both bad, but I think everyone will agree what a great place it is, and how much of our lives we spent here and so many memories we have among us. So thank you for coming this evening and participating. And I'm going to turn over to our chairman of our historical committee, Greg Reddy.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks everyone again for being here. It's a night we've been looking forward to for quite a while, and we want to make this, as Dennis said, historical. We want to capture a lot of good information on things that maybe only you folks know that many of us don't know. We want to make sure we capture interesting stories, interesting facts, etc. Because if we don't capture it now, it'll be gone forever. And that's kind of been our approach, throughout our work on this committee. So we want this to just be like an open discussion, a fun roundtable thing. Please feel free to share stories, anecdotes, things you've liked, things you disliked, interesting happenings out on the course, whatever. Hopefully you came prepared with some of your own stuff. I've prepared a little list of questions. I figured I'd fire those questions at you and let you take turns responding to them. Everybody else here is certainly welcome to ask questions, add input, whatever. But you guys, you important people here tonight, the Golden members, have many, many years of experience and knowledge about what has gone on here at the club. So, like I said, we feel honored, and we're very happy that you guys are here tonight. So thanks. So let's start. I guess a good place to start would be, what is your earliest memory of the club? So who wants to go first? Todd.
I remember when you would walk into the country club, downstairs it was a different setup than it is now. But when you walked in, people would be sitting there, we need one, we need two, we need three, and then you would get a match. And that's how you got the match. It was really different. It's different today. Now when you come over, you have your foursome already set to go out. And I really like the fact that you come in and you would play with different people because it wasn't predetermined who you were playing with.
A little bit later than the earliest times in, but I didn't have a game for the first 25 years I played here. I came in. No,
Was it you or?
No, I didn't have anything arranged. But with John Bellardo was here, very frequently I'd be walking down to the locker room and he'd say, hurry up, your clubs are on the cart, you're on the first tee right now. And with Todd, it was always, you didn't need a game. You came down, you got a game every time.
Yeah, I joined, I think, 71, and I remember the pro shop being so much different. And when you go into the pro shop, Johnny Wadnowski was there, and he was such a great pro, and always made you feel comfortable. And I actually had a lesson with John, and he was a proponent of, what do they call it? Pronation, right? Pronation. And so that's my first memory of the club, was Johnny Wadnowski.
Maxie and I, growing up in Corncrest, Wyoming Valley was very memorable to us. But my earliest memory of Wyoming Valley, I was about 5 years old. And there always was a hole in the fence that you could sneak on to number 6. So I decided to sneak onto number 6 with my little pedal car. And I thought it was a great idea. And until I went down and I said, oh, that sand trap is a nice place to drive my car down, until I got stuck in the sand trap. And then back then we had a guard that would walk around the top holes. And, he came chasing me, and of course I went running. And when I finally got caught and my mother got me, I had a very memorable experience with Wyoming Valley Country Club.
I remember when I first joined, we had caddies, or own carts. There were a few carts the members had. They had a few carts here, and the rule then, if your cart was broken, you could not replace it. So all we had were caddies here. Now we have carts and that nature. I remember you get your bag, Johnny, the pro would give you your bag out the window, and you'd get a caddy, and away you'd go. And there was a bridge from the number where the house is, the hot dog stand is on number 10T. We had a little bridge there, went up along the road, and none of the cart carts. We didn't have carts. We finally did get some carts. The road was not paved; it was all dusty. And everybody played golf. Then we had to go take a shower because you looked like come out of mine. Your back was all dusty, and that was a pretty nice change by getting the cart that's blacktop.
Well, and the halfway house was on number 8. And it was
Yeah,
a real
that
small
was that-
shack.
Yeah, that was there.
And it was run by a person not associated with the club. They just brought this guy in and he
It was about the size of an outhouse. Yeah.
Exactly.
At one time, the Wyoming Valley Country Club was an aid to the postal system. A letter was sent. Well, we used to have a water tower on number 6. A letter was sent, and all it said was, Frank by the Tank, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And one of the postmen said, I know that place. They delivered the letter to Frank Witkowski because he lived by number 6 by the water tank. Now, today, you can take your letter, put the post office, the zip code, and whatever. It may not get there. But in the old days, Wyoming Valley Country Club would help you get there.
Well, I remember back in the day, back in the late 50s, early 60s, we caddied. We all had numbers. And you would take I think there was about 30 numbers, and each kid had one. And what we do is, if my number was number 5, well, if number 6 was first the next day, I'm not getting out. I would wait for a day or 2 or 3 to get the caddy. So that's how that worked. And I also remember the strike. We had a strike once that I remember. And I think they negotiated from $1.50 to $1.75 we got for a bag. Yeah. That was big. That was a lot of money back then for us, for kids, So it was a great place to grow up. We had the Sansui Park here. We had the country club where we made money. And it was just a great place to be. I really enjoyed that was some of the best days of my life.
Yes. We graduated in 42 and then from college in 46. And we were married in 48, and we then bought our first house 3 years later. And anyway, we came down to join the Wyoming Valley Country Club, and we joined. And the day after we joined, George was drafted. He had not been taken before because he had one eye, and they never took him. But now, all of a sudden, they were going to take him, and he volunteered into the Navy. And of course, they were delighted because in the Navy they had a lot of people, a lot of men and a lot of ladies and a lot of babies. So they were very, very happy to have George. So the next day, though, I came down to the club, and I said, "I'm very sorry, we just joined, but we can't be long." And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" And well, I said, "My husband's been drafted," and I said, "He'll never earn the money as a seaman as he did when he was a doctor. So we can't afford it." And the country club said, "Don't worry about it a bit. You just come right down. Don't worry. You don't even have to pay." Now, how do you like that story? We did pay, by the way.
Well, I got married in '56, and Peter became a member, I think, here in '57. At that time, the ladies were like a non-entity. And so we had a group together that we would come and we would have luncheons or card parties. And in '59, I was president of the Ladies Association. It wasn't a golf association. So then when the golf started, they didn't know what to do with us and where we were going to put our locker, and they gave us space under the attic. That's where we had access from outside the house, outside steps coming up into the attic. So of course things got better and better after that, and let me see what was I going to tell you? Michael Sheridan was a very, very good friend of ours. He lived at the Westmoreland Club, and I had him to dinner many times. So in my house, he and Peter got the idea about why the members should not own this club. And I remember this discussion, and then they started the process, and Peter was the one who did the actual title search on the land here for the country club. Michael spearheaded everything, and then they finally decided that the members should own this land. And I think it was mostly owned when Peter did the title search. I think they found a lot of it was owned by Glenn Alden, but then another coal company was involved. But anyway, they got together, and Peter did the actual title search for the land, and then the members agreed that they should buy it, and it became the members club. So that's.
Okay. Should we pass this?
That helped June, I guess, to have a judge and a top flight attorney in the team pushing for that.
He wasn't a judge at that time, and Michael wasn't a judge at that time either. This goes back to the '50s, so I'm here a long time.
Well, one thing about Wyoming Valley, I know when I got out of school, I joined here in 1963, and I had just gotten out of school, and I lived in Erie, Pennsylvania. So I would come home on a lot of weekends during the summer. And there were a few guys here. Some of you will remember the names: Dr. Burns, Charlie Burns, and excuse me, Teddy Roback, and Joe Corcoran, and I mean a lot of the members then used to wait around for me when I would show up on Saturdays and Sundays to play golf. And I years after that, I said to Charlie Burns, I said, how did you guys know I was coming in? Because I said I never called them, I never talked to anybody. I would just show up at the club, and sure enough, they'd be waiting for me. It was always around the same time. It was usually like around 11 o'clock in the morning, Saturday and Sunday. I'd show up and I'd have a game. Dr. Tonry was one of them, one of the members, and there was a kind of an X-rated story, but I just have to tell it. Back then, of course, you know, it was mostly caddies, and we were all. Pardon? You're going to edit this part. Okay. So we were always with caddies and walking. So we're on number 14T down here, and there was a delay. The foursome ahead of us was held up, so we're standing around on the tee, and Dr. Tony was there, and a couple of little young kids that were caddies for us. And Tony looked at one of the young kids, and he said, and he had a kind of a gruff voice. He said, "You kids know this man here. This is Dr. Charlie Burns. He's a urologist." And the one kid said, what does that mean? And Tony said, "Well, if you ever have anything wrong with your pecker, this is the guy you see." That's a true story.
John, tell them how they knew you were coming up. You started the story, you said that they were always waiting for you.
Yeah, I said to Charlie, "Well, how did you know I was coming?" And he said, "Well, we really didn't, but we kind of guessed that you'd be here. We knew you loved the game, you know." And I actually started to play when I was in Erie, and I met a guy out there by the name of Jack Heiner. He was an old retired PGA pro, and he's the guy that taught me how to play. So I'd get a couple of lessons from Jack Heiner, and I'd be anxious to get in here on the weekend and try to beat Charlie Burns and Tonry and Corcoran and the rest of them, you know. Didn't happen very often, you know. They were usually in my pocket, but I had a lot of fun with them.
You know, a couple other things. When we used to caddy, a lot of the guys here, it was like their second home. It was like their bunk, they used to call it. And they'd come here and they'd put their old dirty clothes on in the locker. They'd come with a suit on. Then they'd go out and play. Number 2 tee, they'd take their shirts off. And they'd play all the way around to number 11 tee. Then they put their shirts back on. And they always did. And you know, one of the things they used to do, they used to chisel cigarettes from the caddies. You know, we'd have cigarettes and we used to roll them up on our sleeve here, you know, in a pack. And they used to come over. As a matter of fact, it was your husband.
No, my husband, he never smoked.
You were just kidding.
No, he never smoked, never.
But yeah, they used to come over to take a cigarette off you, you know. But yeah, there were some really good days. Thank you.
The time I had an embarrassing moment, I was new at the club, and I was playing with some people that are pretty influential. I wanted to impress them that I'm not a bad guy. And they were very testy, and you could not talk when they were putting, you couldn't do this. We got to number 13, and the one gentleman was going to tee off, and a car pulled up, and a lady yelled out, "Yo, honey." And he did not take a swing. He was upset. And he said, "Who knows that lady?" And everybody looked, nobody knew her. So he goes to tee up again, and the lady yells, "Yo, honey." He says, "Somebody better know that lady." It was my wife. She went to the hairdressers. This is Saturday. She got her hair done. And at the hairdressers, the ladies put their keys in the wall. And then they left. One lady took all the keys. So my wife didn't have a car to get home. So she's yelling, "Yo, honey." And I thought they were going to crucify me because of that. But they forgave me, and it was okay. But I always said that this course had the greatest members in the past. It still has the greatest members in the future. It's a tremendous club. And I think we do a lot of good things for a lot of people.
This might be a quick one, hopefully. Who wants to talk about what you remember about the first round you played here at the club? Do you remember it?
Who can remember back that far?
You remember everything. How do you not remember that?
Now, Greg, as a member or sneaking onto the golf course?
Yes.
Good point.
Either one.
Well, back in the day, all of us, or most of us kids that lived in the Corncrest, Buntwood, Hanover Green area, and caddied, we loved sneaking on the golf course at night. So that was always a treat. We'd play the top holes, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then around that end. But the highlight of the caddy experience was that on every Monday, you were able to play in the morning from as soon as the sun came out to noon. So I guess that would be my first official round here. And you learned really quickly that for some of the older people like Maxie, you better learn to play pretty fast, because if you got in front of him and you held him up, you were going to pay for more than just somebody yelling at you. But that was if you came up on a Monday morning. How many kids, Joe, would be up here? 50, 60 kids, and we would go as many holes as we can play in that period of time, because when 12 o'clock came, the membership came out. But I think that was a lot of our first introduction to the game, and what a great place to be able to play at Wyoming Valley Country Club. So that's my memories of my first round.
Another quick one. Who can remember their first full set of clubs? Dennis? You're the youngster in the group, I guess, huh? You don't remember the clubs you used last year.
Let's see, my first full set of clubs. I grew up in Corncrest, right by number 6, and didn't have too many clubs. Most of my clubs were left over, or once a month my mom would go over to Arlen's and buy me a club for $5. But I worked in the pro shop for quite a number of years, from probably 1963 to 1971. And one of our members, Joe Wojtek, used to like to change clubs like people change shoes. So he had this really nice set of Walter Hagens, and, he would buy them for maybe $200 then and sell them for $100. So that was my first full set of clubs, was Joe Wojtek's Walter Hagen golf clubs.
I think mine were Wilson Staffs, which I probably held on too long with those clubs, but I think they were my first set.
My first were set of Samson E. Blue Ridge. I used to hunt and fish a lot, and I started playing golf, and I thought, boy, I got to get a set of clubs. So I didn't have much money, so I had a good pistol I used to use for hunting, and I took that and I traded in for a driver and a 2-wood. And I saved some money. I got 5.79 irons, and then later on I got a set of Sam Snead's signature clubs. But all the good clubs, you had to get them in a pro shop. You couldn't get them in a store. You had to go to a pro shop. You want a set of Wilson Staff, or if you want to buy a Wilson Staff ball, you had to come to a pro shop. You couldn't go to a store. You can buy K28, but you couldn't buy a Wilson Staff or anything like that. But that was my thing. Sam Snead Blue Ridge, that was hell of a club. I couldn't play with them, but I still can't play with the clubs I have now anyway.
You still have them.
I still have them on that.
Yeah, I remember very clearly my first set. They were, excuse me, Ben Hogan's. And the way I got them was, this goes back to when I lived in Erie. And we used to go across the street from the plant where I worked to Dante's Cafe. And we'd sit in there and we'd drink some beer and play liar's poker. And I mentioned Jack Heiner, the old retired pro. He would get in the game. And there was another gentleman there by the name of Bob Butts. And so we'd play this liar's poker and drink beer and play poker and drink beer and then drink beer and drink beer and drink beer. And finally one day, after having a half a skinful, Bob Butts said to me, "You know, John, I think you need a new set of clubs." And I said, well, I don't have my own clubs now. I said, I'm just playing with clubs that somebody would lend me because, I was just fresh out of school and working. And he said, "I've got a set of clubs for you." I said, "Well, why, what are you doing with them? Why don't you like them? Why are you selling them?" And he said, "I bought a new set of clubs." And I said, "All right, let me see them." Well, I looked at these clubs, and they were, the old blades, but they had a little gold ring on them on the back of the club. I thought they were gorgeous. So I bought the clubs because they were beautiful. I had no idea whether I could hit them or not. And I played with those clubs. It had to be 15 years. Now, in this day and age now, you play with clubs for 3 or 4 years and you think they're ancient. But I played with them for a long, long time.
My first set of clubs were used, they were 1958 Wilson Staffs, leather grip with a flat spot on the handle. I used them until 1972 when I thought they were lost in the flood, and then went and got a set of Titleists after that because I didn't know whether I had them.
Greg, speaking of golf clubs, over the years in the pro shop, Joe would remember this. When we first began, we had members that you would have to buff the clubs when they were done. They were that old. And one particular member by the name of Dr. House Owner, I think he lived to almost be 100. And he had an old set of clubs. They had the fish wire at the end of them. And every time he played, you'd have to, working in the shop, you had to make sure his clubs were buffed, and then the old leather grips, you'd put Lexol on them. And it was interesting, the array of clubs within the pro shop going back to, and I know we have some examples here, the wooden shafts, the hickory shaft, and then early metal shafts, and then some of the members like Dr. House Owner, who nobody loved to caddy for. They used to call him Skunk. I don't know why, but when his bag came out, everybody would run because he would take a quarter off your pay every time you lost the ball from him. But
he never paid a quarter as a diamond. He used to give you a dime for a tip.
well, he sometimes never gave a tip.
And he never gave a tip.
And going back to the caddy strike, I know it's a little off subject, but Nancy's husband actually negotiated the caddy strike, and that was one of the few strikes we had being here, and it was exactly about a quarter in wages. But when Dr. House Owner's bag came out, all the kids would take off over the hill because nobody wanted a caddy for him. But my friend and I, who lived in Corncrest, we used to caddy for him all the time because he would always play on Sunday afternoon, and you knew you were going to get a second loop if nobody was going to take him. So, but that's the kind of clubs he had.
I just thought of something, talking about where Dennis is talking about those holes. I guess it would be 5, 6, and 4, 5, 6. Well, one time, Debbie and I were playing, and all of a sudden we heard this like rustling, and we thinking, what the heck is going on? It was Art Brun Sr. hitting balls, and he was hitting like 1,000 balls, and but he startled Debbie more than me. But it was just a funny incident on the holes that Dennis is talking about.
You'd look on the green on 3 or 6, it'd be like snow.
Yeah.
The balls would be completely covered with his balls that he's hitting from the middle of the fairway.
Going back to Art Brun Sr., was probably one of the greatest amateur golfers of the area. You talk about him hitting balls, and we'd be always trading clubs or whatever, but he was so intense on his training that Art Jr., who was only a youngster, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, was out with Artie, and Art was practicing on number 6, and Art Jr. was playing in the sand trap. And Artie gets done playing, packs his stuff up, goes home to his house in Buttonwood, and lo and behold, he gets home and his wife says, well, where's Art Jr.? Art Jr. was still back on the golf course. Art was so much into his game that he forgot all about him.
Good stuff. Next question may or may not apply to all of you, but who wants to share some memories about their most memorable round or an accomplishment on the course out here that you're proud of?
I'm not the best of golfers, as you all know, but on number 4, I hit a drive, and there was, what are the birds that are there?
Geese. Geese?
The geese, they were a bunch of geese on that knoll. And this one hit the head, and you could hear it. We actually heard the ball hit the head of the goose, and he collapsed. And when he collapsed, all these other birds came to look, and then they flew away immediately and left him lying there. And he was there for a couple days before they took him away.
That's a heck of a birdie.
Well, my memorable round of golf was in the club championship. I played many club championships, and there's a guy here who beat me many times. And he's sitting right over here, you know. I remember one time I was 1 up coming down 18 on the final round, and this guy goes ahead and makes birdie eagle to beat me on the extra hole. But that's the way it goes, Mark, you know. But then I came back on the senior club championship, and I played my best 2 rounds ever. I shot 69-65 to win that club championship. But I have 17 runner-ups, regular club championship.
I played around with a good friend of mine, Ronnie Whiteout, and I'm not a good golfer. I was having a great day. We got to number 17 tee, and he said to me, "You're even par." Really something you don't want to tell somebody. I ended up shooting a 74. We went bogey, double bogey. But Ronnie was a great guy. He was a good attorney and a good friend. But that was the lowest I ever shot. And for me to shoot around that low is incredible, because I am really a hacker. And I played golf with a lot of great golfers here. Maxie. I played with Mark. Mark Girolan is fantastic. He's a good golfer, and he's a great coach. And the kids he taught up at Crestwood were impressive, because I told Mark the other day, I played a ground with a couple of kids from Crestwood, and we let them play through. And they got to number 10. And those 4 kids whacked that ball incredible. They went to white tees. They were almost on a green with their shots, and they weren't hitting drivers. So I respect his ability as a coach. And it was a great day for me to play with people like that.
And I bet they were polite too, weren't they?
Oh, yeah, they were. They're very respectful, very. But that's how he trained his people.
Well, I only had 1 hole-in-one at Wyoming Valley, and I was playing with the late Jack Garishan, Danny Mazzacco, and his brother, and we were playing in a tournament here, and stepped up to number 4B tee, and it went in the hole, and I think Jack Garishan was more excited than I was. So there's an asterisk, I guess, next to the hole-in-one, but it was a thrill for that day.
Let's see, when you're here 50 years, you have a lot of memories of a lot of bad shots and a lot of good shots. But my first hole-in-one, I'll remember, I came over and I was only about 17 years old, and I was lifting weights, you know, at night. Came over, I was tired, and I went outside, and I played with Dr. Russian, Joe O'Karma, and Frank Knork. And we get to 13, and it's like the worst shot you could ever hit in the world. It barely got off the ground, and it goes in the hole. So of all the good shots over the years and all the shots that didn't go in and all the no-miss tournaments, that's probably one of my most memorable things. A lousy shot that went in the hole for a hole-in-one.
I don't have it. This has nothing to do with Wyoming Valley, but up at Fox Hill. We were playing in the tournament, and on number 3, Tom Heffernan had a 53 MG TD that he was giving away for the first hole in one or closest to the pin. Well, I was closest to the pin. I was 17 feet 9 inches, and I won the car. And I beat a guy by 2 inches. But Tom wanted to give the car away, whether hole in one or closest to the pin. But I was pretty close. Big barn.
What kind of car?
53 MG TD. Wow. Candy apple green.
George, I always thought you got a hole in one there.
Nope, I never had a hole in one. I had 2 hole-in-ones in Florida, none here.
That was the same year you won an all-expense-paid trip to Hawaii, too, by the way.
George.
This is not about a specific round, but it's about a specific shot. We were playing in one of the charity tournaments here. I think it was for the Olympics, if I recall. A tournament to support the Olympics. And Jack Crossan was my old coach in high school. And his brother, Chink, was a fabulous, fabulous basketball player and played in state championships and just he was just outstanding. Over the course of my working life, I found a fellow down in Philadelphia by the name of Harry Middleton, and when Luzerne, where Chink Crossan played, won the state championship, he played against I think it was Lower Merion, where Harry Middleton played. And Harry showed me one time this headline from a newspaper clipping that he had. The Crossan-Middleton duel was the headline in the Philadelphia Inquirer. At any rate, this tournament, I invited Harry Middleton to come up because I knew my old coach would be there. Chink had passed away at the time, but a bunch of the Crossan family were here playing in the tournament. So I was out on the practice putting green here, and Harry Middleton, the fellow that I invited from Philadelphia, had a little intestinal problem, and he was in the men's room. And so I was out there putting, and I heard this voice call, "John, John!" And I looked up, it's my old coach, and he's standing outside the clubhouse here by the putting green. He said, "Come on up," he said. So I went up, and he said, "You can't go out to play golf without having a couple of beers first." So I had a couple of beers with Coach, and Harry finally got out of the men's room, and so we go out, and we started on hole number 15. And there was a gift that I think Martz had, Frank Henry had supported a hole-in-one on that hole, was a trip for 2 to Disney World. So we get down to 15, and I'm playing with 3 other guys, and it was, "Oh, well, okay, well, you go. You all right, I'll go." So I tee it up, and I hit the first shot from the foursome right in the hole. And I hear this voice behind me, "John, John!" And I turn around, and here's Coach Crossan coming running down from 12T, which they were just starting as well. He said, "It was the beer! It was the beer!"
We were on number 15. I hit my really great shot right into the pond. We drove down. I was standing on the edge of the water, and his thing came out of the water. He had on a diver's outfit. He was picking golf balls. Scared the hell out of me. I thought, this is the monster from the Blue Lagoon. And I had no idea, but it was really scary. He had all kind of black stuff on, and a mask and a hat, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. But I guess they had an agreement. He would get the golf balls. So many went to the pro, and so many he took to sell. But that was scary.
Did he find your ball?
Nobody could find my ball. They were gone.
I got a Todd Paterno story here. We're playing number 5 one day, and Todd hits the ball in the water, number 5. And at that time, that big Ketty Nine-tail, the big tall reeds there, I remember right in front of the thing there. And he's over looking for a ball, and Bill Gibson come over and said, "Watch out, Todd, you don't find Moses in there."
Obviously, I haven't been here as long as you gentlemen and ladies, but Brian McDermott told me a funny story one day. The kids used to come from Corncrest and come over here, and they used to drink over there by number 7, down below by the green. And one day they were down there drinking, and a ball came flying over the hill and almost hit them. And as the group was driving down to go to the green, they ran over, picked up the ball, and threw it in the hole. And this woman comes down, they're looking for a ball, and she goes, "Oh my God, I'm in the hole. I got a hole in one." And she's all ecstatic and everything. About 2 weeks later, Brian McDermott's down there drinking again. Again, another ball comes flying over, almost hits the guys in the head. People are riding down to go to the ball, or to the green, and they pick it up, throw it in the hole again. Same exact woman. If you look on the board, there's a woman from 1975, I believe it is, has 2 holes in one, never hit the green. Exactly.
Okay, funny stuff. Little change of pace here. This is an easy one. Who's your favorite professional golfer of all time? I thought this would be a good question to ask because it'll be some of the people that golfers that a lot of people in the future are not going to know who they are. So who wants to go?
My favorite professional golfer is Arnold Palmer. And I think a good kindred because of that is because he came from a background, not a rich background, a hardworking father, and he made it up the hard way. And he was always so nice to his fans and gave so much back to charity. There was never a bad word. There was never not. He was a fierce competitor, but he was always rooted for the other guy. Even some of the most tragic times when he lost an 8-shot lead in the U.S. Open, he was still gracious in defeat. And my one story, or my 2 stories for Arnold Palmer is I was lucky enough in 1967 to win the first Tony Lima Golf Scholarship. And I was walking up the podium at the Waldorf Astoria to get the award, and this man who actually looked almost black, he was so suntan, grabbed my hand, and he said, "Congratulations, fellow Pennsylvania," and it was Arnold Palmer. But another story about him, and this only happened maybe 2 years before his death. My friend Bruce Muchler and Carl Jolly played golf with a fellow by the name of Harry, and I forget his last name, but Harry had had his first hole-in-one after 58 years of golf. And they were at Arnie's tournament. They were there for the dinner before. They had got there because they had won a 4-ball tournament. And Bruce went over to Arnie, who was at the state podium, and said, my friend for 58 years has finally made a hole-in-one. Could you come over and talk to him? And Arnie said, "Well, I can't do it right now because he's in the midst of his podium thing." But right after that, he came over to the table, and Harry, was sitting there, and all of a sudden he pulls his hand and says, "Harry," and I can't remember his last name, "I heard you had your first hole-in-one." And, he didn't have to do it. It was who would even known he did it, but he took the time to make that man's life special. And I think his whole life he had done that for many people and many times.
Another story about Arnold Palmer, and I can tell you that I think Arnold did more for the game of golf than any other human being. He was just a fabulous guy, and I had a very interesting encounter with Mr. Palmer years ago. This is back when I lived in Erie. And I belonged to a club out there by the name of the Lawrence Park Golf Club. And Arnold Palmer came in. There was some kind of I don't recall now exactly what it was, but he came in to play a round of golf at Lawrence Park. He played with the pro there was Leo Anderson, his name was, and Leo and Arnold and two members were to play with the group. And so I don't recall the detail now, but they were to tee off at such and such a time, and one guy didn't show up. I happened to be there, and Leo said, "Come on, play with us." So I had an opportunity to play in the same foursome with Arnold Palmer. And I'm hitting the ball, and he's hitting his, and I'm noticing that, jeepers, I'm hitting my tee shots right there with Arnold, and I thought, boy, I was pretty good, I'm starting to show my muscles, and we got to this par 5, and he turned to me and he said, "Young man," he said, "you're hitting the ball very nicely. I like your swing, and keep it up." So he proceeded to tee off, and he hit the ball, and I couldn't see it. It went so far. And I got up and I tried everything I could. I had to be 70 or 80 yards behind him, It was amazing. And there I thought I was pretty good, But he was such a great guy, and the personality that just wouldn't quit. And so kind and so friendly, and just never gave you the sense that he was better than you, or that he had no time for you, There's a second guy that I want to talk about just quickly is Matt Kuchar. And Matt Kuchar played when I think he just finished college, or maybe he was in his last year of college, up at Glen Mar. There was something up at Glen Mar. I don't recall exactly what it was, but he was in a tournament. I don't know whether it was a junior pro tournament or a college tournament. But anyway, he played, and they finished the tournament, and it started to rain. And it was pouring rain. And there are a whole bunch of kids there, that wanted autographs and stuff. Matt Kuchar stood in that rain and signed autographs and signed autographs and signed autographs. He was soaking wet, but just never stopped signing autographs for the kids. So I thought that was pretty impressive for a guy of his stature.
Of course, you probably all know that Sam Snead was probably one of my favorites. Not my favorite, but one of my favorites. And just because he came down there for an exhibition in 1961, and I had the opportunity to caddy in the group. So I spent like 5 hours out there with Sam Snead. So that was just a great time.
Any interesting stories to tell us about that day, Max?
Well, he wasn't the most pleasant guy in the world, He really wasn't. He didn't talk to anybody. He didn't talk to his caddy. He didn't talk to hardly anybody. On number 10, he missed the putt on number 10, and he walked over to the bag, turned his putter upside down, and he jammed it in the bag. But he started to talk to us like on number 17, I think.
Snead, when I lived in Erie, I used to marshal out at the Firestone tournament, and a fellow that I worked with and I used to go over and we were marshals. And one year it rained midway in the tournament. I don't remember exactly what day, but it was raining. It was raining pretty hard. And so all the pros went in the clubhouse, and they allowed us to go into the clubhouse as well. So we just kind of mingled with the players. Some of them were nice, and but Snead was standing by this window, looking out toward the golf course, and so I walked over to him and I said, Mr. Sneed, do you think it's going to clear up? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, clear up to a tall Indian's ass. And that was Sneed, you know.
You know, when somebody brings some fame to your town, it makes you feel proud. Years ago, I sponsored Tom Treba for membership in his country club. And as a result, his boy got on the pro tour. He won 2 tournaments. He did really well. He had some physical problems. When he was young, he poked his left eye out with a twig or something, so he had no vision in his left eye. And he had some problems with his feet. And they took care of it. They had to pin some bones. But he's won 2 tournaments. And now he's on a senior tour. And it's nice because he is one of our representatives from this country club. He's a good pro. He's a good kid. He did some work on TV with broadcasting. And I wish him well. And he's a good pro. And he's from our territory. So it shows we grow some good people here.
All right, let's switch gears again, talk a little bit more historical stuff. I'd be curious, and I think probably others are too, to hear what do we have here at the club now of significance that didn't exist when you first joined?
I'm going to say it was carts. You know, back then we didn't have carts. And one of the things we used to do when we finally got some carts, there was no cart paths. So the rule was, if you won the first hole, you get to go first in the cart because the other guys eat the dust because there were no cart paths. They were all dirt. So if you won the hole, that was great. You guys get all the dust behind you. Well, that's true, too. You're probably right.
I think you're going to talk about carts. Let me talk about the watering system, because I think that's probably the most significant improvement in this club. When I joined the club, there was no irrigation system. So, you'd get to the middle of the summer, and the place would be like concrete. And it just made the course so short, but tough, because you had no idea where the ball was going to end up. You'd think you had a good shot, and it'd roll and roll and roll and roll, and Lord knows where it would end up. And Leo Corrigan was the guy behind the installation of the watering system. And of course, the big question at the time was, where are we going to get the water? And his family was in the coal mining business, and there was a slope mine underneath a portion of this club out by number 4 Green, and out in that area. And Leo told me that the miners in that slope used to drink the water that flowed while they were working in that mine. And that's where we get the water for our irrigation system to this day in 2021.
I'm going to drink the water out of that pond.
It's not by the pond.
I understand.
Bottom number 7, you make a left.
Oh, over there.
And you go toward.
Yeah, but it's pumped out of the mine.
If I remember correctly, Leo Corrigan had his crew come out and do the watering system on the golf course. And Leo was the president, and he did a lot of work here. I don't know if he gets enough credit for what he did, but they did put the watering system in. And Tom Treba and I ran across a guy called Benny Sechrist from Wilkes-Barre Township, and he did our first cart paths. Granted, they weren't the best cart paths in the world, but they were the first cart paths we had. And they held up pretty good, but we did some work here, and they brought some heavy equipment in, and when they moved that equipment around, it kind of tore up the cart paths that we had because they weren't really sufficient. But there was a lot of improvements on this course over the years, and it always gets better. Right now, our grounds crew is out there working all the time, and the course is in excellent shape. And that's due to a lot because of the administration we have in here now, and they should get credit for the work they're doing.
Greg, you want to know what's different now than before? Yeah, well, yeah, obviously the improvement in the locker room. When I first joined, there were metal lockers, and it was funny, it was configured differently then, and there was a door that, not where it is now, but it was right in the same row as my locker was. So I had to be careful that if somebody went out the door and I had just taken a shower, that I had to put a, make sure that there was nobody, no ladies out there while I was changing. So that's been a tremendous improvement is, you know, the new locker area, no question. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else want to?
Anybody remember when that was? When was the locker renovation done? Early 90s, right?
I would think so, yeah, yeah, right. And obviously, the bathroom renovation, you know, is great. I mean, that's so much nicer than it was, you know. And I know we have a member here to thank for that, but that was another thing that definitely was needed, and it turned out very nicely.
So, quickly, the converse of that. Anybody want to weigh in on what you had years ago, before any of us were around, that we no longer have here?
I'm not
Elaborate.
sure. I said characters. I'm not sure I can talk about too many of them, but no, the characters. Several come to mind, but yeah. I remember years ago, before this whole Sheridan addition was done here, there was a porch. The roof over the bar below, there was a porch, and there was an open roof over the top of that porch. And we used to have a party there once in a while. And the fellow by the name of Chuck Pollock had a friend who made this big, gigantic grill. It was made out of a couple of half barrels, and cut the barrel off and put it out there on the porch one evening, and was cooking whatever we had for the party. And this thing started to flame up, and I guess it was charcoal in it, and they're putting the charcoal fluid on the stuff, and it's flaming up, and the flames are going up close to that roof. And everybody said, gee, is there a fire extinguisher? Get some water or something, get something. And this was back in the day when nobody really liked the clubhouse. And then a whole bunch of them said, no, let it go. Yeah. But we had some real dandies here that used to like to, they liked the atmosphere, and it encouraged some elbow bending, and we had some great stories of guys that ended up in the trees here on number 13 and other things, but some real, huh? Yeah. Some real personalities. We've got some now, but they were a little different back then. You could get away with a lot more then. The laws now regarding drinking and so on are much more strict, so you have to be a little careful. But it was sort of no holds barred back then.
You're talking about the clubhouse, and everybody wanted a new clubhouse. I remember we had the tornado, and everybody would come down just to see what was going on. with the course, and everybody was disappointed because the tornado did not hit the clubhouse.
When we bought our house, I don't know why, but George Kaminsky from Kaminsky Brothers brought over 7 huge pieces of anthracite coal. I know nothing about that story, but before my husband died, he said, remember, the coal does not go with the house. So now, what am I gonna do with this coal? So I'm thinking, this club is built on anthracite coal. And these are beautiful big pieces of anthracite coal. They're shiny black. That maybe it could be used among some of the shrubs or something, because we are on anthracite coal.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to donate them and pay the cost of bringing them here if they know where they want to put them.
Wow.
Yeah, very
Isn't that nice?
Yes, very nice.
How about a hand of...
You have to decide where the best place.
Sure.
But I thought when I'm on number 13 green and I look up on the hill here, I think in places on that hill would look nice, or a whole lot of them right at the front door maybe somehow, you know, but.
Maybe you should have some input on where it goes if you have a preference.
Wherever, but whenever anybody's ready, I'm ready to deliver them.
This is about Evil Knievel. This is about Evil Knievel and Jerry Decker. Jerry Decker, well, Evil Knievel's played here, and Jerry is looking at Evil's bracelet. So Evil said, for $500, I'll take you down number 1, and I'll give you a stroke, and I'll play for the bracelet and the $500. He says, but you got to go by my rules. So Jerry says, okay, I'm getting a stroke. I should win this hole. So he says, before you start, you have to drink 5 shots, one right after another, and then we're going to play number 1. So Jerry took the 5 shots, and he gets on the first tee, and he whiffs the ball. So Evil says, that's all right, I'll give you a mulligan. To make a long story short, Jerry paid the $500 to Evil.
Well, some of the celebrities, there was a lot of celebrities that played here over the years. But the one that I remember, I especially came down to see him, and it was the Oak Ridge Boys. And at the time, they had their famous song was Elvira. And they stood on number 1 tee and they sang Elvira. And I thought that was just great.
When was that?
Yeah.
When was that? Do you remember?
Boy, that was back in the 70s.
Yeah, Sean Connery.
We had Sean Connery here, Samantha Eggers, and Richard Harris. And if you remember, Andy Perugino was a member, and he entertained them at his place, and he entertained them here. And it was really something to watch Sean tee off on number 1. Everybody was out there watching him. And they were doing the Molly Maguire movie at the time. So we had Steve Miserak here, the pool shooter. And we had a lot of celebrities, and they really enjoyed the course. And I can see why, because we do have a great membership and a great club. So
I know we had a lot of pros here. They would usually come in as an exhibition, usually sponsored. Joe Karma, who was one of our members, had a Ford dealership, and he seemed to get players in here. We had Joya Spores, Sam Snead, Andy North, right after he won the U.S. Open. The Monday after, he was here playing our golf course. But one of the maybe not so much known celebrities was a Australian pro by the name of David Graham. And David Graham came in to do an exhibition with a Monday tournament. And what he did is he would be on number 13 and hit a tee shot with every group. And it was a pouring rain. It was a miserable day, but we went through at the tournament. And you know, he stood out there all day in a pouring rain. And I remember 13 from the 160 marker, he'd hit a 6-iron. And you watch him, and, you know, back then we were younger, we could hit an 8-iron there. But he'd hit that 6-iron on the green every time. I know 25 groups are in fair. I don't think he missed one shot. But the most impressive thing was after the tournament. A lot of times when these guys did exhibitions, they'd get their money or do their commitment, they'd be out of here. But after the tournament, and I don't really remember what tournament it was one of the bigger charity tournaments, he stayed here in the ballroom, and he helped Barry Fees, who was the pro at the time, give the trophies and the prizes to every flight and stayed with the membership like well into the night. And I just was so impressed that he would stay here, have a pint with the membership, more importantly, saw the importance of the local pro and helped him hand out those trophies. And I just thought that was a tribute to him and to the club.
So, one last item. Again, obviously, you guys represent literally hundreds of years of membership here. You've experienced things that many of us have not. I've been here quite a long time, but not near as long as you. There are a lot of people that haven't been here very long at all, and you guys know things and have experienced things that nobody behind you is going to. And, you know, our biggest goal, I think, as our history subcommittee here is to make sure we capture really interesting information and experiences that make this club what it is, because if we don't capture it from folks like you, it's going to be gone forever. So one thing I would like to ask in closing, and I'd love to hear, you know, from as many of you as possible, what advice, or do you have advice for younger people here as members of the club, or do you have specific information that you really want to make sure the younger people understand that maybe they may not otherwise know about if you don't bring it up here tonight and we don't do what we're doing here with this committee? So advice, important information that needs to be retained.
Well, I think that the new members coming into the club, the young fellows, and they're all nice. They're very nice people that are coming into the club right now. But it's a place to come and have fun and just enjoy yourself.
If I could offer a word of advice, it would probably be to related to the governance of the club. I think if there has been a shortcoming at Wyoming Valley, it's been a topsy-turvy road for all the years that I've been here in the governance structure. I believe that the club would be better served if there was a more structured approach to governance. Over the years, you know, we've had these competitive elections for presidents and board of governors and so on, and it seemed that you know, someone who would get a hankering for some particular project that they wanted to do or something they disliked about the club, they would jump in and run for office and maybe you know, get enough of the members on their side to do that. And there didn't seem to be that guiding principle that those who came before us had. Prior, historically, there always seemed to be a progression of governors of this club until some point in time, I don't know, maybe around the 70s or 80s, where that just started to change, and it seemed that that we were going back and forth with different ideas that seemed to be more personally related to particular individuals than following a long-range plan, and that going through the steps in the governing board until you learned to the point where you're capable of being in the top administration. So that, I think, would serve the club going forward very well.
Lately, I noticed we have some new members, family members, and I think it's important as you run across these people, welcome, make them feel comfortable here, that they belong, and it's going to be a great adventure for them. And they'll always feel welcome, and they're going to bring their friends, and that's been our history. We've been a great club, we welcome people, and we make them feel good.
That's a lot of thought here. I don't know, but I was a member of the board when Joe Hosey was president, and you elect people to the board because you have a confidence in them to do that's going to do the best for the club. I think the president board does the same thing. You're meeting till 10, 11 o'clock at night. We used to meet till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and we did our best to try to make the club better. And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. The president board, they got a heck of a lot tougher job than we had. Our biggest problem then was, well, not like I have now. We had like 20 people in line to become members, and there was no hopscotching. You had to wait for your turn. Now, we need members. You know what I mean? And every time you do something, I remember I walk in the door. I hate to walk in the door because some guy grab me by it and say, "Hey, the greens are too slow. The greens are too fast." And the fellows who serve on the board, I think they get the same thing. Because every time you walk in the door, somebody's grabbing me by the collar and say, "This is wrong. This is wrong. That's wrong." So, I respect for the board. This board and all past boards and the future boards. So I think we should back the boards, and if there is a problem, we should talk to the board and tell them what our feelings are. They'll listen to you, and that's my feeling about the club right now. I feel the boards, let's back the boards, whatever board they are, past, future, present. They did their best, and let's keep it going.
Yeah, I saw a sign. I keep going out of the locker room. Members, make sure you don't wear T-shirts. So I think that's important, that they respect the rules of the club, and dress appropriately. Don't wear your hat backwards, and so I don't know how often that's happened where people are wearing T-shirts, but, you'd like to have the members dressed appropriately, whether they're playing golf or having dinner or lunch in the club. So I would hope that, we would encourage them to abide by the rules of the club, whether it's fixing ball marks or whatever. That would be my message to the younger group.
Yeah, I think it's important, and sometimes we forget that around a table, we grew up with role models, whether we were a caddy or it was our father or our uncle. And so we kind of learned from them manners. I mean, when you first became a member, whether it was John Wadnowski or Roy Gettle or Tony Soa, they would take that early member out and say, "Let me see you hit a 5-iron," or "This is what we do." And we don't do that today, and maybe we should look back at it. But a lot of these younger members, and sometimes I criticize them when they leave a beer can on the 16th tee, but they really haven't had any role models. They only see golf from what they see on TV. And maybe it's part of our responsibility to encourage them to know the history of the club, but also set a positive role model for them that they know how to behave on the golf course and obey the rules, but not in a way of making them feel bad, but in a way of just helping them along.
Anything else? Anybody else have any questions, comments before we wrap up? Well, I think this went at least as well as I'd hoped it did. I appreciate you guys coming in again.